Welcome to this live stream from windowsontheworld.net. And tonight I've got two guests, both Spanish and both very interesting. I do keep getting messages as to where people can find my shows, even though every week and every broadcast and every live stream, I always say that our shows on Sunday are on the live shows page at windowsontheworld.net, and we go out live every Sunday at 9:30 p.m. UK time. And that's always on the live shows page at windowsontheworld.net, and we go out on the platform called Spreaker, and you can subscribe to that on the homepage at windowsontheworld.net. The homepage at Windows on the World also has all the links that you need. So if you go to the homepage, you can join our Spreaker channel. You can also subscribe to us on Odyssey, because we put all of our Sunday shows and all of our content and everything we've ever done that's been uploaded to YouTube is now on Odyssey. We don't put much on YouTube. We've had community strikes on here. So this is just an occasional live stream, which will be in the first instance put onto YouTube. So I hope that's sort of clear now. And we've got a huge archive of stuff and lots of things I want to put out all the time. I have so much in the archive as well. And I don't have time to actually put a lot of it out. But if you look at our last show, Demons of Terror, and the one previous to that, COVID Climate Terror Storm, you can find those at the live shows page at windowsontheworld.net. And we put them all in that archive. So all the Sunday shows are all on the website. Everything that we've ever done is on the website. And we have articles section and a latest shows section, which is basically a mixture of some shows and articles. So it's all a bit mixed, but it makes a sort of encyclopedia of information. And I think the stuff that we've put out over the years has made this really big archive, and it's very relevant to what's going on now. What we're seeing is the end of law. We've talked about this quite a lot, the actual end of the law system as we know it, the bringing in of communitarian law, the Noahide laws on the back of communitarian law. All these concepts are a little bit too much for us to get into tonight, but you can find references to all this stuff on the website. I want to give you just a few bits of information before we bring our guests on. Now, a lot of people are still using these, I would say, agents or charlatans or remedy gurus for very minor debts. You don't need to do this. Debt collectors are really easy to get rid of. And today, I actually posted a remedy which is for parking tickets on private land on a Facebook group called Debtless. It was immediately removed. And then I find out that these people are charging an awful lot of money for information which is actually free. And a lot of these people, these remedy gurus, they've been misleading people for years. And people seem to be very gullible about this because the remedies are dead simple. They're all on my website. For instance, go back and have a look at parking tickets remedy and more. That refers to BOVAT, BOEVAT.org.uk, which is a very good friend of mine's website, and him and his brother put together the remedy for parking tickets on private land. For instance, if you park in, say, Sainsbury's car park, that's owned by a company. A company cannot issue a fine. Only a court can issue you a fine. So basically, they're threatening you to see if you pay. You then ask for an invoice because they're a company, because companies can only issue invoices under the Bills of Exchange Act. And you ask for them for a fully formatted VAT invoice of what they're actually charging you for. And they can't charge you for a parking space because they can't prove that you've actually withheld money from them by using a parking space. It's very simple, this stuff, and we've been covering it for years. I actually find it quite boring to deal with now, but there's a lot of people out there, as I say, sort of selling information which is not correct. So basically what happened was the owner of this site then comes onto my post on Facebook, and I don't use Facebook very much because I showed that they were charging, £75 a head so that they could be taught how to maybe get into further debt, basically, because these people charge you money all down the line. Next thing is he's threatening me with court action. I said, okay, well, get your lawyer to write to me and tell me which of the information that I put at the header of this copy of your website post, tell me, get him to tell me which bit is defamation. And then, of course, he said, I don't need a lawyer. Then I said, well, crack on then. Let's go to court over it. And of course, then the toys were thrown out of the pram and it turned into childish tantrums and ad hominems. And then, of course, he had indulged in defamation himself. It was all, I suppose you think Elvis lives on the dark side of the moon and who would visit your website and all this kind of rubbish, right? Then the next thing is all his posts are gone and he's gone as well. But it's quite interesting, actually, because I found something about this group, and it was basically, it seems to be that, and they're not the only ones that do it. It says it's worth starting a separate topic. This is on some thread on some debt website. It says the premise appears to be that this person tells people they aren't in debt, offers them mentoring at £400 an hour, as well as paid for letters to ask for a DSAR, which is basically a subject access request, right? Which you can do. That's something you can do yourself. So basically, they're just acting as agents and charging a lot of money for it. And he says, which apparently says is the key to unlocking the scam the agents have perpetrated on the victims. It's getting very common law Malcolm here, as well as drafting replies to court documents. Inevitably, when it doesn't work, it's because you've not done your research properly. And this is what they always do. So I've covered these remedy gurus for at least 15 years. And none of this is that important, but I did at one point get threatened by JBW Group, which is a bailiff group who were undercutting other bailiff groups. And basically, I put an article up, which was on my old website, which came up whenever you Googled them or your search engine of choice. My article came up right under their website, and they didn't like it because I was telling people that they were charging fees which weren't correct, and their bailiffs were self-employed. And there was a lot of problems with these self-employed bailiffs because they assume rights that they simply don't have. And they make up their fees. They make up their scheduled fees, which they're not allowed to do either. That's why they brought in the Control of Goods Act. But basically, they threatened to take me to the High Court. City law firm wrote to me. I sent them back a rebuttable affidavit of everything that we'd said, and we never heard from them again. So basically, when people start shouting defamation and libel, they're usually incorrect, because you can't actually defame somebody by stating facts and making claims publicly, unless those claims are likely to undermine their reputation in a very detrimental way. But if you just state facts, then of course that's not defamation. But these people don't seem to get that. I was going to point you to a few shows, actually, because I won't be doing many more of these live streams on here. We'll do the occasional ones, but as I say, we go out on Sunday at windowsontheworld.net, 9:30 p.m. And those shows end up on Odyssey. We have an Odyssey channel, all the links, homepage, Windows on the World. We also have a Discord channel if you want to get on there, where we sort of exchange information. But it's worth looking at COVID protest social engineers, because a lot of people are still getting caught up in problems with realizing what protests are really about. And that's a really explanatory document and full of links and videos, COVID protest social engineers. Another one is called Small Charities and Venues Under Attack. These are all at windowsontheworld.net. Small Charities and Venues Under Attack describes how the Saul Alinsky principles, which are used against small organizations, work. And we've had this organization, this little theatre in Wales, shut down because they weren't going to introduce the COVID passes. Now, if you understand the way that change agents work and the local councils, basically the whole of the media, then you can fight back. But you have to know the Saul Alinsky rules, and you can download Saul Alinsky's rules for radicals at windowsontheworld.net on the free books page. Odyssey.com is better than YouTube. It certainly is. Yes. So, yeah, we've covered a lot of these sort of charlatan organizations, and I think that's a very useful article. There's one basically all about these trusts that are set up, and that's called the Age of Constant Distraction. And there's links on there. So all of these articles are basically like encyclopedias of knowledge. And that's how I wanted to do it, because it doesn't date either, because there's one system being imposed, this communitarian system, which has taken over the law system. So I think this is quite important stuff. I mean, things are getting very serious, and we're seeing the results of what I've been sort of talking about for a very long time, the results of Agenda 21 or this totalitarian police state. But we're going to talk about quite a few things tonight. And a few years ago, I actually brought down Crime Stoppers, the Crime Stoppers website in the UK. And we found out that basically Kent police had perverted the course of justice. They basically put people on there who shouldn't be on there. So I got the whole of Crime Stoppers taken down. The head of media at Crime Stoppers resigned. Lord Ashcroft, the chair of trustees at Crime Stoppers, actually brought everything down off the site when I'd written to him onto his private email it was actually on his website, and it was under business opportunities. And you can see that it's called Police Court Crime Farming. Now, the whole of the Crime Stoppers site was then redone, and there are now no regional most wanted pages. And basically what happened was, after I emailed Lord Ashcroft about the fact that Kent police were prejudicing trials, putting people on there that shouldn't be on there, even the lawyer got rebutted by Kent police and basically told where to go when he asked if it would be okay if they gave us the reason why this person had been put on there. So basically the police were acting above the law, and that is a major problem in the UK. People don't realize actually how corrupt the UK actually is. But yeah, on Friday night there were 480 people wanted, most wanted in Kent. By Monday, nobody was wanted. So with one email, I wiped out all the crime in Kent. Now, the reason this is important is because what we're seeing here is these partnering organizations. So Crime Stoppers are partnered with many organizations, including Mighty. Now, we've also got this layer of private surveillance and intelligence, and they can all work together. They can all actually create problems for people, and the state are involved through the intelligence services. I've been talking about this for years. So you've got this crossover of the police, private companies, and the so-called intelligence community. But that was a very fascinating thing, and it shows you what can be done, because with one email, that was a changing situation for the whole of the country. And of course, police cars still have phone Crime Stoppers on the side, but not many people know about that story. And that's my point. So people tend to get drawn into things of no importance and ignore the things that are important. Of course, none of the press in the UK would have anything to do with this story. So yeah, there's just a few points there, really. And I've also been addressing this idea that these doctors getting together on these platforms of doctors are going to have an effect. No, they're not, because they don't know the system. A lot of these people seem to think that the system and the law system, which underpins the system, are going to be of any use to them or are going to give remedy. No, they're not. Far too late for that. So we are seeing the end of law. My guests tonight. Yes, thanks, Paul. If you want to know more about that, do have a look at that article, because it's incredibly important. It was a part of an investigation that took me 3 years, but I managed to get the whole of the Crime Stoppers website completely redone. And of course, you never get any compensation, you never get any recognition from the state, because then it opens the doors for other people to sue them. So how many people's trials were prejudiced by them being on this website? And if you look at it now, there's about 10 pages on there, but a lot of the people have been on there for years, and a lot of them are there for immigration issues, which is not a thing for most wanted. There's a few unsolved murders on there, but they had pages and pages of people who just shouldn't have been on there. Ridiculous things, absolutely ridiculous things. And that is the problem with these public-facing organizations, because a lot of these organizations, they're using volunteers or they're NGOs. And these people are not competent to be dealing with the stuff they're dealing with. And I had a lot of problems trying to get to the actual crux of the matter, dealing with Crime Stoppers. But then, of course, the head of media got in touch. He was very good on the phone. And 2 weeks later, he resigned. He'd been there 15 years. He was about the only person there who acted honourably. Lord Ashcroft did pull everybody off and obviously give Kent police a good thrashing verbally. But interestingly, Kent police are still putting quite a lot of people onto Crime Stoppers, and they're about the only force that's doing so. And that was very interesting. The whole case was very interesting, and it was corrupt from beginning to end. So anyone who thinks that there is law in the UK is sadly mistaken now, because that was in 2017, 2018. We're into a totally different system now. Okay, I'm going to bring in Gonzalo Carrera, and we also have Pedro Rosillo, who's an author and private detective from Spain. Gonzalo is going to have to translate for him, so I'll keep the questions quite simple. But first of all, I'm going to bring in Gonzalo. Gonzalo, hi.
Hello, how are you? Okay, all right.
Very good. Yeah, just done a bit of an intro for everybody, and just saying really how corrupt the actual system is. And a lot of people don't realize the people who have faith and belief in the system are generally the people who are reading these newspapers, which are fact free. I was actually looking at the Independent newspaper, and even though the fact checkers are full fact, which is an absolute joke, which is a lobbying group basically for global governance, and Bill and Melinda Gates.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so even Bill and Melinda Gates actually called out some of the stuff that was in the Independent. In other words, that anti-vaxxers were causing COVID infections. It says false. So even Bill Gates couldn't actually support that theory, you know.
But it's incredible, Mark, because some people that they think they're awake, they go and check the fact checkers. This is how doom and gloom people are right now. It's very boring. But it's totally corrupted, the whole of the judicial system. I mean, obviously Pedro has been a private investigator, private detective, has been investigating politics of security, the corruption in the judicial services. He's got plenty to tell us about, definitely.
Yes, and we were going to talk a little bit about infiltration as well of groups, because I was talking about this Facebook group that's demanding large amounts of money. Then, of course, when it all fails, they blame you for not doing your job properly. And this was one of the reasons, actually, I stopped giving people advice. Of course, I don't give legal advice. I'm not legally qualified, but I actually won many court cases, and 2 against Waltham Forest Council, which changed the way that documentation can be presented and the way that documentation should be issued from councils. But all of this should have been case law. It was all wiped from the registry trust, which is why you won't hear about it. So I love it when these so-called remedy gurus who are making loads of money, they come up and they say, well, what have you done? Well, it's going to take me hours to tell you, but I've been doing it since 2006. We used to have a website called landofthefree.co.uk, and we did some serious damage to these criminal organizations, you know.
Yeah, they're kind of working with the state as well altogether, but they don't bring solutions. They're gonna bring more hassle, etc., etc. And in the end, I mean, you have helped quite a few people that I know for free, basically, Mark. They gave you some donation, but there are people, like you said, why you have to make some money out of something that everyone can find out on the internet if you think about. But the media, they don't want people to know about all the remedies regarding debts, regarding debt collectors, council taxes, parking tickets, etc., as we know, of course.
Yeah. I mean, people put, of course, the judiciary is corrupt. That's not really what we're saying, actually. I mean, I'm just talking about the system, the way the law system's actually changed into communitarian system. For instance, if you are judged to be against the narrative, which is the globalist narrative, then you are automatically guilty now. People don't realize that.
Yeah. I mean,
they don't realize that. You might get the odd judge who's kind of balanced, but that's not really going on anymore. I mean, I've been up to the Royal Courts of Justice many times and seen masters and got remedy, but not many people know how to do that. You have to go to the Queen's Bench Action Team, room EO7, and then you get a meeting with a master, and you can have things heard in chambers. So people don't realize that there are still these remedies, but they are being taken away. And a lot of these companies that are interfacing, especially bailiff companies, have become incredibly corrupt because, of course, they're private.
Yeah. And it's totally illegal what they're doing sometimes. But people, the media, they don't talk much about it, as we know, Mark, like anything else. And if you kind of debate anything or kind of says, well, I want to see the evidence of anything, they're going to start saying that you are far right, which is ridiculous, as you know.
Well, this is an interesting one because everything now outside the globalist narrative is far right. So they're not very bright or intelligent, these people. They're just persistent with their propaganda. So if you're persistent with propaganda, it does stick. And that's what the Saul Alinsky rules are all about. They target a person. And I know exactly how this works because we suffered it for 3 years. And then I went through the judiciary with this court case, which was completely corrupt, where the police destroyed the evidence, the CPS buried the evidence. And this was a big thing even in 2017. But now, of course, it's much worse. So people don't realize what they're actually interfacing with. They're not interfacing with a system which works in a kind of way that dispenses justice, that there's no such thing as that.
No.
It's balanced against the common good. So if you're threatening the corruption of the system, then that's not for the common good. And you will be actually attacked and demonized through the courts, which I have been as a defense witness in a case where there was no evidence that there'd been an assault committed. And this is the one that relates to Crime Stoppers. The police assaulted me, destroyed all the video evidence of the assault, and perverted the course of justice in the station in front of the person who'd been detained. Now, this is serious. These are serious crimes. To actually get defense evidence, which has to be put into a bag, and it's called chain of command, I think, chain of evidence. Sorry, chain of evidence. So chain of evidence means that it goes into a sealed bag, which is signed by the desk sergeant, and then it's signed again when it's given out, and it's not going to be tampered with. They gave this person back an evidence bag that hadn't been filled in, which is in itself a criminal offence, which was ripped open. It had actually bypassed chain of evidence. So the desk sergeant had asked two police to throw me out physically so I couldn't give evidence. And then I realised why, because they were about to pervert the course of justice. And that was Maidstone. That was Kent Police. Kent Police are one of the most corrupt in the whole country. And they did get a big rap on the knuckles from Lord Ashcroft about their misuse and their abuse of the Crime Stoppers website. And that was all brought down, as I said in the intro. But these things are quite important because they've paved the way for this communitarian system. And now it's much worse than it was.
Yeah, I mean, look what happened to our friend Campbell from Jab for Freedom. They gave him all the COVID fines they were cancelled, Mark, and they gave him quite a big fine, as you know, £10,000, and they didn't cancel the fine. They gave him a much smaller fine, but still, it's just ridiculous. Why did he have to pay for that small fine when all the COVID restrictions that they were unlawful, as we know? So he's going to try to appeal. It's just ridiculous, the whole thing. So everyone was cancelled their fines except this gentleman. Doesn't make sense. You have to pay £180 fine plus all the court expenses of something that wasn't illegal just because you were playing music in a park. It's just stupid. Really.
Yeah, well, the thing is, if that keeps happening, it'll make more and more an example of people, and then it will get to a ridiculous stage. Paul's just put in Police Scotland take some beating. Well, they give a lot of beatings out as well, don't they? Police Scotland, yeah, they are actually the most corrupt, but Kent Police are pretty bad as well. You know, I mean, when they start attacking defense witnesses, you know, there's something wrong, don't you? I like it when people go, it's turning into a third world country, because whenever I've been to a third world country, I found the police absolutely fine, to be honest.
Yeah. I've been in Cuba once. Yeah, Argentina, Peru, and people there, you know, they were actually very, very, very fine. As long as you don't make any troubles, Mark, I think it's all right.
Oh, yeah, that's right. And interestingly, we've had some infiltration. I just mentioned that on our Discord server. It's quite comedic, really. But I think some people get very worried by this sort of thing because we have one long-term member who's just it's just disappeared off the face of the earth. So Hector, if you're out there, do come back.
We used to have a laugh, right, Mark?
It was great on there. Yeah, it still is. I mean, people can join it. They go to winnersontheworld.net and all the links are on the homepage. People, the reason I keep saying this is because people still like, where can I find the links? Well, they're on the homepage at winnersontheworld.net. Everything you need to know is there.
You need to download the Discord channel, and that's it. It's an app, and then
you can download this app. But there's a lot of information on there, and it's quite a good way to get away from all this crap on social media.
I love when
people are just posting the same thing all day.
I love when you recently we've been making some funny jokes like anyone that comes new, you need to show your passport.
Well, we had about 4 or 5 of what you could really define as trolls. One that just kept making trouble all the time and arguing with everybody, and another one that was very subversive, and another two that were openly putting out misinformation and trying to trap people. So they all were removed. But I've got a bit of an eye for this, you see, because I've suffered a lot from this infiltration. When I was at the People's Voice TV, when I had my website, landofthefree.co.uk, I found that I had been befriended by two people who turned out to be the very people who worked for the intelligence services, who were demonizing me on a website that they owned. And they were stupid enough to put them down as managing directors of the company, which was defaming me. They're not very bright, these people, but it opened up a lot of things there, because it made me realize that private security are very, very involved in all this. So you've got these corporations like G4S, they can potentially do a lot of damage to people because they're a huge part of the judicial system.
Yeah, that's right.
And this is another thing, that when people get taken into custody, often the duty solicitor is useless and also working with the police. So it's better not to say anything at all.
But it's very
that is a very important point, I think. Yeah.
But it's very obvious, Mark, because many of these people, they are very kind of how you call it, very kind of bossy and bullying, and they are very open-minded. They don't have any Facebook page, any Instagram page, any picture around, any real name, and you're trying to show that to people, and they still don't get it right. It's incredible.
No, which is why I don't go on these social media sites. We get zero engagement on there. If you put up something which is free and useful and works, people ignore it. They generally prefer charlatans, because charlatans put out so much BS that people go, oh, that sounds great, I've got to be part of that. I mean, we talked about this, what is it, Universal Community Law Trust. I mean, they were just basically laughed out of court recently. There's a court ruling. But the point is that this undermines trust law. So it means that people like you and me are going to have difficulty using trust law, because these people are undermining it. And the courts can then turn around and say, well, you're not qualified and you don't know anything about trust law. Previously, it was up to the court to prove that you were doing something wrong. But now, with these charlatans, people going into court and making fools of themselves, it's become easy for the system to demonize people like us. So in other words, these people are sort of agents of the state, whether they realize it or not.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, they are a vehicle, some kind of a platform for the state as well, without realizing many times. You reckon, right, Mark? They don't even realize times, actually.
Yeah, that's right. And I was shocked by the amount of infiltration, and people don't realize, especially in the UK, that everything's infiltrated. There is no group that's not infiltrated.
Yeah,
all of them are. I mean, we've had Hope Not Hate writing articles about me, and they're a joke. They're a sort of arm of MI5. I call them the MI5 Special Needs Group, which is what they are. And they are quite subversive and nasty. But once you know the Saul Alinsky rules and you know what they're doing, you can kind of hammer them back. And, you know, basically they say a lot of things without evidence, which puts them in a very dodgy position legally. You know, so a little bit of knowledge with how this works is really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. A newspaper that brings a lot of evidence is The Guardian, right, Mark? I mean, the ridiculous stuff they were saying, like if you are if you don't believe in vaccines, or you don't believe on that, or some particular things, then you are right wing, you are a Nazi. It's just crazy. It's unbelievable. It's logical fallacy.
Well, yeah, the Guardian is a joke, but look at the people who read it. We were talking about that earlier, weren't we? They all seem to look the same. You know, it's like, well, what happened to them? You know, they all had a very successful personality bypass, and then started reading this kind of globalist propaganda and then spouting it out as though it's the truth. And of course, you're right wing, you support Trump and think Elvis lives on the dark side of the moon if you don't believe him.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, although they haven't got any facts, as you know, Mark. Yeah.
Aren't there thousands of people working like this in the government? Yeah, these people we're talking about. Yes, it's full of them. I mean, local councils and local government is full of these people, all with their noses in the trough, all getting paid for doing very little, in my humble opinion. And basically, I've taken on a lot of these people. And what they do, it's a bit like these phony people who want to get rid of all your debts for you by charging you loads of money. They give it the big one, but there's nothing underneath it. So they'll threaten you. We'll threaten you with court action, which Waltham Forest did, like this idiot did this morning from this debtless group, when they've got no grounds to do that. Then they actually get themselves into a position where they are completely legally helpless because they've made an assumption that's completely incorrect or accused you of something you haven't done. And that is gold, because that means that you then are in a position where you are winning. To quote common law Malcolm, you know, it means that you can actually divert them into a cul-de-sac where you take another avenue in the court. All this stuff is strategy. It's really interesting, though. Maybe we should bring our guest in now, Pedro Rosillo.
I was thinking of that. Pedro Rosillo. Yeah.
So do you want to introduce Pedro?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Is he there?
No, I'm saying, do you want to introduce him?
Okay, no, I thought I was waiting that he will appear. So,
okay, well, okay. Pedro has written a book called El Arconte about the influence of the archons, which means rulers, leaders, magistrates. The archons are very much mentioned in a lot of these old Gnostic writings, which ended up in a volume called the Nag Hammadi Scriptures. But I think Pedro's got his own reference to that. He's also a private detective, which is really interesting. And that is a fascinating job and gives him access to a lot of information. So, Pedro, I just introduced you. Welcome.
Hola.
Hello, Mark, and everybody, and thank you for your invitation for your program.
Thanks for coming on. I'm going to try and keep the questions really simple now, because obviously Gonzalo is going to have to translate. So just tell us a little bit about your background. I mean, how did you get into your career, and especially the career path you chose going into being a private detective?
Mark me está preguntando que nos cuentes un poquito de tu pasado y cómo te metiste en la fascinante vida de ser detective privado.
Bueno, yo siempre he pertenecido al mundo de la seguridad. Empecé con 30 años de vigilante de seguridad privado y prácticamente en seguridad pues lo soy todo. Aparte soy escolta privado, soy vigilante de seguridad, he sido conductor de transporte blindado, los que llevan el dinero, a los bancos, soy director de seguridad. Me fui 5 años, he estado en Vascongadas, pues protegiendo a personas amenazadas por la ETA, por la banda terrorista ETA, y fue en Vascongadas donde pues me saqué el título de detective privado, ¿no?
Okay, fantastic. Okay, vale. So yeah, Pedro has been working for a while. He started as working as security. Then he was also working as a driver on the lorries where they will take the money, all the big amounts of money to the banks as well. He also then he went 5 years to work as a bodyguard, etc., as a protective bodyguard for at the País Basque when there was the problem of the terrorist attacks from the ETA, the terrorist group. And during those 5 years in the País Basque up north, he finished the career he took the title of a private investigator, private detective. And that's when they started getting very interested about politics, private security, intelligence services, etc., etc. But yeah, he's got a great history behind him, definitely.
Yes, I think this is a fascinating area, because that was really part of my introduction. We were talking about this idea that the intelligence services are all partnered with private organizations now. So you've got these private companies who are a big part of the judicial system. Is that something which he's noticed in Spain?
Son las compañías privadas parte del sistema judicial hoy en día en España también, Pedro, como pasa en Inglaterra.
¿Las compañías privadas? ¿Cómo? No entiendo bien la pregunta.
Sí, si las compañías privadas, los servicios de inteligencia, etcétera, son parte del sistema judicial en España, están dentro de ahí también.
El servicio de inteligencia español está en todas partes. En todas partes. Quiere decir, sí está en las compañías privadas, en la justicia, y sobre todo yo pienso que está muy, muy metido en el periodismo aquí en España. Pero sí, en la empresa de seguridad privada donde yo trabajaba, por ejemplo, hay una empresa en España que se llama Ombus. Es una empresa que es de la familia Cortina, y esa familia, bueno, pues está ligada a la realeza y a los servicios de inteligencia españoles. Por ejemplo, los Cortina, el comandante Cortina estaba al mando de las operaciones en el Servicio de Inteligencia Español durante el 23F, durante el golpe de Estado. Y ese hombre tenía esta empresa, creo después esta empresa, se llamaba Ombu, que operaba en Vascongada. Que decía, hay un contubernio, sí, pero sobre todo también en el periodismo.
Okay, so yeah, basically, Mark, private security intelligence services, they are everywhere infiltrated in Spain. He also worked for a family called Cortina, which they were related. They were part of the royal family as well. He worked for them as well as bodyguard, etc. But he's saying the intelligence services, they are literally everywhere in Spain, in the private companies, in the newspapers, in the courts, etc., etc., etc.
Yes, that's what I thought, because it mirrors what's going on in the UK. And
Yeah.
I think all Western countries, really. I mean, I think it's something the public are unaware of, the level of infiltration and the different levels of infiltration as well. So you've got low-level infiltration, like undercover policing, which can actually be easily exposed. Then you have agent provocateurs who work for the intelligence services. Then you've got private security, and they are all involved as well. So I think that's a very important point that people realize in the UK, and I think it's something that people are a bit naive about. So yeah, moving on, let's now get into Pedro's book and how that came about. Can you kind of give us a quick synopsis and try and keep everything very brief, because obviously people here are speaking mainly English?
Yeah, of course. Me está diciendo que si nos puedes dar una pequeñita sinopsis de tu libro El Arconte, si nos puedes contar un poquito y ya te lo traduzco al momento, sí. Cuando empezaste.
El Arconte se narra una historia de un niño que tiene una aparición con un fantasma, el Arconte, con un arconte, y bueno, le pide que se suicide porque en el futuro, pues, en fin, será un personaje importante, ¿no? Y lo que se relata en el Arconte a través de ese niño y las conversaciones que tiene con ese demonio, pues el combate, digamos, que existe entre el reino del bien y el reino del mal.
Okay, muy bien. Yeah, so basically the main story, simple, Mark, is the story about this child, 12-year-old Pablo Romero, that he encountered this ghost. Is like a demonic entity that he offered him at exchange that he will commit suicide. He wants to give him like all the power in the material world, in the kingdom of evil, etc., etc. And it's a clear mirror of what's going on in the world. Is like a war basically between heaven and the earth, between the forces of evil and good.
Yes, that sounds like quite a classic scenario. Very interesting, all that, because this idea of this influence and this negative influence, which is very prevalent and becomes part of the hive mind, people actually take it on unconsciously, and it becomes part of their behavior. And then we see the mainstream media and what comes through the so-called news outlets, and it's very, very similar to demonic entities. When we talk with Jerry Marzinski, we've done many shows with him, we talk about the entities that attach themselves to people, and the media do exactly the same thing. It's called gaslighting. They deny the facts and they make accusations and they say things that are untrue, which is all demonic. So this is a big part of the way the law system has been completely perverted as well. The system of natural law and natural justice has now become social justice. What does he think about that? The way that the system's changed with this idea of social justice? That would be a good question, I think.
Mark me está diciendo que es muy interesante como tu libro se está reflejando exactamente lo que está ocurriendo, que han prácticamente saboteado y dominado nuestras vidas los gobiernos, los medios de comunicación, y han hipnotizado a la gente, como sabes tú bien, con ideas, con cosas que son totalmente ridículas, que no tienen ningún sentido. También habla Mark, por ejemplo, de cómo nos hemos convertido en una sociedad que si no haces lo que el resto tiene que hacer también, te consideran un criminal, te consideran una oveja negra, etcétera. ¿Qué piensas de la justicia social en estos momentos? ¿Cómo cómo han saboteado, cómo están dominando por completo, o sea, lo que se llama en inglés comunitario. Si no eres una persona que hace todo lo que hagan los otros, entonces te van a estar intentando demonizar con cosas totalmente ilógicas, diciendo que eres de extrema derecha, diciendo que eres un loco, un conspiranoico. ¿Qué piensas de lo que está ocurriendo en el sistema judicial en el mundo entero, en los gobiernos, cómo lo están dominando todo y la tipo de hipnotización que hay con gente con diplomas, doctores, abogados, etcétera, etcétera?
Bueno, la pregunta es un poco profunda,
Sí.
pero digamos que Ulpiano, nosotros estudiamos el derecho romano en nuestra civilización como base, ¿no?
Ajá.
Y Ulpiano decía en el derecho romano que justicia o ley o derecho no es darle a todo el mundo por igual, sino darle a cada uno lo suyo. Así es como lo definían los romanos. El derecho quiere decir que está esa concepción del derecho que la tenemos en nuestra civilización desde el origen, está completamente opuesta a ideas marxistas, comunistas, etcétera, etcétera, etcétera. Quiere decir, desde nuestra concepción de derecho básica, ¿no?
Claro.
Eso por una parte. Y por otra parte, sí es cierto que hay que entender que en el mundo hubo un gran combate que fue la Segunda Guerra Mundial y que después de esa, que fue esencialmente, y yo lo considero así, que fue básicamente una guerra entre el Banco de Inglaterra y el Banco Central Alemán, y ganó el Banco de Inglaterra, esencialmente, y a partir de ahí, pues lo que tenemos, pues el sionismo internacional, quiere decir, el mundo
Claro.
es sionista. Y el sionismo usa todos los medios de comunicación, a su alcance, pues para, entre ellos la propaganda, pues para crear un mundo paralelo, una matriz. Y la mayor parte de la gente, y eso ocurre en España, como en Inglaterra, como en todas las partes, vive en un mundo paralelo, completamente.
Claro.
O sea, no saben que el del combate entre ese reino de bien y ese reino del mal, ese combate esotérico, profundo, que se está librando. Y esas personas, pues se perderán, evidentemente, pues se perderán. Es como en el Evangelio, pues las vírgenes, pues que no tenían los candiles encendidos para esperar al novio, ¿no?
Exactly, yeah. So, Mark, is saying Pedro, I mean, this is going back to Roman law, basically, going back to Ulpiano. Ulpiano was saying in the days of the Romans that law wasn't that to treat everyone equal, to give everything to anything to any person, anything that is right, that is righteous, right? And that's what's going against the thing that you always mention about the communitarian, that you being like a communist, that we all have to be equal, we all have to sacrifice for the others, we all to be having to wear a mask, etc., etc., etc. And then he thinks there's been a big change after the Second World War. He feels that it was a war between the Bank of England and the German bank, and basically since they won the Bank of England, things they have changed completely, and they have been kind of progressing until now. What we are going through right now is they've been working on it since the days of the Second World War, that we are completely dominated by the Zionism, the narrative, all the big newspapers, all the banks, the health, etc., etc. Something that I think you know already very well, Mark.
Yes, and I describe this system as globalism, and it does have a few major players, which we talk about. Now, the thing is that when we talk about this idea of communitarian law and the common good, it all sounds really great to people who haven't interacted with the law system. And if they actually do interact with the law system, then they find out that it's very detrimental because individual rights are usurped for collective rights. There's no such thing as collective rights. A collective or community doesn't have rights. Only individual people have rights within that community. And the common good is balancing the individual rights against those of other people. Now, the whole idea is that you are not infringing on anyone's rights unless you commit common law offenses or you openly are breaking any law. Now, the point is that with these new laws that are coming in, they've got the online harms bill, police crimes and sentencing bill. They are basically changing the goalpost to the point where not only do you have to prove yourself innocent, you are prejudged for a crime which is not a crime. And that is now the end of law. We did a show recently called The End of Law. What does he think about that? Basically, the usurping of individual rights for the so-called common good has ended the law system.
Mark está diciendo, Pedro, que básicamente él piensa que esto es totalmente globalista lo que está pasando y que ya llevan trabajando hace muchos años. ¿Tú qué piensas lo que se está intentando hacer en Inglaterra? Acabar prácticamente con la ley de cada persona individual y crear una ley comunitaria. Es decir, lo que hablamos antes, de que si no haces lo mismo que los otros hacen, estás considerado un criminal, y están tratando de traer leyes en Inglaterra. Por ejemplo, todo lo que hemos hablado cuando pasó, si no confinas, si no cierras tu negocio, no eres una buena persona. Ya estás cometiendo un crimen, cuando realmente como derecho inalienable no es un crimen, no es ningún tipo de delito lo que estás haciendo. ¿Qué piensas de esto? ¿Cómo han dominado los globalistas todo y lo del derecho individual, cómo lo han saboteado por completo, etcétera?
Bueno, los globalistas han escogido al Partido Comunista Chino como modelo y el socialismo. Los británicos, desde luego, si hay un pueblo que se ha distinguido quiere decir, antes incluso de la Revolución Francesa, pues tenemos las leyes británicas, quiere decir, las leyes que se aprobaron en el Parlamento inglés, que se estudian en todas las facultades de Derecho, en donde el Parlamento británico por primera vez pues doblegó la voluntad de un rey, ¿no? Eso quiere decir que va incluso a lo que quieren imponer ahora en Gran Bretaña, como en todo el mundo, pero hablando de Gran Bretaña, pues va en contra del mismo ser de los británicos. Quiere decir, no me veo sinceramente a los británicos doblegados por historia y por tradición ante lo que lo quieren imponer.
Mark, Pedro is saying that clearly right now what they're trying to follow is the system of the Communist Marxist Chinese Party, which is exactly being communitarian. Sacrifice yourself for the rest, being part of a community, otherwise you are not considered a good person. He is very surprised. He feels that he doesn't think the British, they're not gonna fall for it, because in Britain that's where they started the common law, the most important with universal rights, etc., etc. So he cannot believe that in England we will fall by the communist kind of laws. But I think he will be surprised that we fall in, right? What's your opinion, Mark?
Yes, I think he'd be very surprised, because what I've been outlining during this show and many other shows is the end of the law system as we know it. And I've seen that, I've experienced it, I've actually been a victim of it. You know, now, of course, people scream about being victims if they feel as though they have been insulted. And that is the end of law. And what we've seen ever since the Big Society in 2010 is the training of communitarians of the Big Society, which has now resulted in what we have. We have a whole media which is tied directly to the intelligence services, and basically we have a government which is instructed by global governance. We do not have anyone in the Houses of Parliament who is actually speaking their own mind. They're all trained puppets and change agents, and anyone who's out of line gets demonized straight away. So basically we have a problem. It's a global coup. That's what the current situation that we're in is all about. It's a global coup, and it's been done with audacity, but by people who are not competent to be doing what they're doing. They have no knowledge of what they're doing. So the knowledge base of so-called elders and priest class was lost a long time ago. So just to tell Pedro that basically we are under that system, which you could call Marxist communist, but is communitarian. And we have agents of change in every part of government. What does he think about this new society structure where people are basically trained into these principles, and then they become groups and NGOs set up and organizations which basically demonize anyone outside them? Is that prevalent in Spain? Because from my knowledge, it is.
Básicamente, Pedro, Mark me está preguntando él piensa de que lo que está ocurriendo es un golpe de Estado globalista, que por mucho que te sorprenda, realmente quieren acabar con las leyes universales en Inglaterra, las leyes de las casas del Parlamento, están saboteando todo, hasta el punto, y eso tiene razón, la policía aquí en Gran Bretaña, me pregunto que igual pasa igual en España, la policía, los políticos, los diputados no tienen ni idea de lo que está ocurriendo. Ellos como marionetas siguen lo que el Estado les está diciendo, digamos las Naciones Unidas, y obedecen y punto. ¿Crees que en España también hay muchos infiltrados? Por ejemplo, ¿qué pasa? Intentan hacer estos grupos de sociedades, de comunidades, y en todas partes, pues en la política, en Facebook, en la sociedad en general, en las comunidades de vecinos, y lo de siempre. Incluso meten infiltrados agentes secretos que trabajan para el gobierno en protestas, etcétera, que se meten como agentes provocadores, que se hacen pasar por buenos ciudadanos, pero lo único que están haciendo es llevar el mensaje del gobierno y también coger información, etcétera, etcétera. ¿Crees que en España la gente también está hipnotizada con lo de que si no haces lo que el resto hace, estás considerado una mala persona o una oveja negra? ¿Crees también que hay infiltrados por medio de la policía secreta, los servicios de inteligencia, etcétera?
O sea, lo que ha ocurrido en España es brutal,
Ajá.
auténticamente, porque pasó de ser un país católico, conservador, a ser en 40 años prácticamente lo contrario.
Sí.
Lo contrario. Quiere decir, algo tremendo. Hay que explicar lo que explicábamos en privado. En España no existía la masonería, porque España era durante la Guerra Civil prácticamente se definió la Guerra Civil como una cruzada contra la masonería y contra el comunismo principalmente, que era lo que querían imponer, y Franco persiguió a la masonería. Es decir, que nosotros estuvimos 40 años como en una burbuja, digamos, defendidos por un Estado militar paternalista del nuevo orden mundial. Resulta que muere Franco, a Carrera Blanco lo mata supuestamente la ETA, que no pienso que no fue así, y con Carlos de Borbón y con la monarquía entra de lleno en España el nuevo orden mundial y los planes sionistas, quiere decir, y ahora estamos de lleno claro, en ese tipo de planes. La sociedad española ha cambiado por completo. Los servicios de inteligencia en España están infiltrados, como he dicho antes, sobre todo en el periodismo para cambiar la opinión pública.
Claro.
¿Bien? Y están infiltrados en todos los sectores de la sociedad. Y en cuanto a nuestros gobernantes, Pedro Sánchez se ve claramente que es un títere de la élite global.
Como todos, como Boris Johnson, como todos.
Se ve, quiere decir, un zoquete, un inepto, digamos así, pero quiere decir una persona que incluso ha plagiado su tesis doctoral, quiere decir que le han ido pasando. Pablo Casado, el jefe de la oposición, es otro igual, se sacó la carrera de Derecho, la mitad de la asignatura en un año de la carrera de Derecho, con lo cual quiere decir que le han ido pasando. Igual, quiere decir, son dos Bilderberg, además van al club Bilderberg, quiere decir que estamos completamente infiltrados, totalmente, pero en todos los niveles, vamos. Los niveles.
Está clarísimo. Basically, Mark, what we were talking before going live, Pedro just explained it very clearly. In Spain, we are completely infiltrated by the communitarian, by the globalists, by the New World Order, etc. We have 40 years with Franco between 1936 to 1975, which Franco was against the Freemasons. It was against the secret societies. He didn't want to be Spain part of the Zionism. And the problem was after just when Franco was going to die, there was going to be a new president called Carrera Blanco, which they said he was killed by the ETA, the terrorists in País Basque. That's not that he doesn't think that's true, that he records those that were intelligence services. They brought in Juan Carlos, the King of Spain. And from that, Juan Carlos decided to create, Franco didn't want Juan Carlos initially, that we would have a monarchy with political parties. Juan Carlos then, when Franco died, decided to create a democracy, a monarchy with a democracy, with political parties. Spain was in a bubble that there was no infiltration at all, but Franco as well realized that Spain couldn't carry on being isolated from the rest of the world. And what happened when Juan Carlos won, the political parties started coming, and since 1977, 78, with the Spanish Constitution, Spain has been completely infiltrated by the Communist Marxist Party, by the intelligence services, by the Zionism, the newspapers, the health, the government. I mean, the corruption is such that, for example, the Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez has finished his career just with favors, basically, from the elite. The leader of the opposition from the Conservative Party, the same thing. He finished the career of law within 1 year. With other people, it takes a long time. So he is saying some of these guys, they are complete ignorant. They haven't got a clue. They might be in power, but they are complete puppets from the elite. Like the same thing with our friend Boris Johnson, Angela Merkel, Macron, you name it, Mark, Joe Biden, all of them basically. So yeah, Spain is basically complete dominated by the globalists. I mean, totally. Since Franco died, that was a change completely. During the Spanish Civil War, the main aim from Franco was a crusade against the Freemasons, against the secret societies, against the globalism. But as soon as he died, the whole thing just fell apart, basically.
Yeah, that was interesting that the intelligence services do these false flag attacks. I mean, this is a major thing, and I think we're going to see a lot more of that.
Yeah.
I think as this situation carries on, there's going to be a lot more distraction issues. I predicted that. I predicted that there would be an MP killed a week before David Amos was killed, and that's not because we've got some kind of crystal ball. It's because when you understand how this works, you can actually predict what's going to happen. There's something in the ether before these things happen, because there's a certain situation that arises within the narrative, and you know that they're going to have to be able to carry on with the plan. So something has to be done to distract the public or to bring in a different angle. And I actually covered the Joe Cox murder, and I put up that show that Richard D. Hall did the other day on our website, because I think it's very useful to know this stuff and how it works. Of course, the situation is always the same. We went from sort of, massive terror attacks like 9/11 and 7/7 in the UK to basically terror on the cheap, which was people driving vans into other people, which is merely bad driving and not really terrorism. And so terrorism became very cheap both on the continent and the mainland of the UK. And I think we're going to see more of those. And of course, this is a major big distraction from what's going on. So in conclusion for tonight, because we've been going quite a long time, I know I did quite a long introduction, but I think people are enjoying this, but because we've got two languages going, it's probably a bit of a strain. What does Pedro think the future holds? How do we actually manage to resist what is going on? Because I put out my view of that and the solutions. What would he say from Spain people should be doing?
Pedro, pues Mark me acaba de comentar algo muy interesante. Por ejemplo, que muchas veces la gente le dice, tienes una bola de cristal, pero está todo tan premeditado que se ve venir. Él, por ejemplo, él mismo me dijo, y él no es agente secreto ni nada, pero me dijo, no sé si escuchasteis en España que un diputado británico conservador, que era muy buena persona, lo asesinaron de repente. Mark, justo antes de que este señor muriera, desgraciadamente, dijo, vamos a ver cantidad de ataques terroristas que son hechos por agentes infiltrados, como pasó con el 11 de septiembre, con el 7 de julio en Londres, que es todo premeditado. Por ejemplo, si te acuerdas, una furgoneta que habían atropellado a unas personas, decía que eso se veía claramente que era todo arreglado por los servicios secretos. Pero en conclusión, Pedro, ¿cuál es tu opinión? ¿Qué tipo de soluciones futuro le das a la gente? O sea, ¿qué esperanzas tienes? Sea en España, en Reino Unido, ¿qué crees que podemos hacer? ¿Cuál es tu opinión? ¿Cómo podemos salvarnos? ¿Cómo podemos luchar día a día? ¿Qué se puede hacer?
Bueno, en mi opinión, nada. Lo humanamente posible, nada. En el sentido de que yo lo he intentado todo.
Yo también.
Aquí tiene que venir una intervención divina. Quiere decir, si no hay una intervención, digamos, del espíritu, y así es como pienso, claramente,
Sí.
es imposible. Es imposible. Yo, sinceramente, todo esto, toda la masonería, todos los luciferistas están tan exaltados y quieren implantar su plan, es porque saben que Cristo viene, quiere decir, porque hay una conciencia crística que va a caer el velo de la historia, va a hacer caer el velo de la historia, el velo de la ciencia, quiere decir que todo lo que nos han enseñado que es mentira. Entonces, esa conciencia, los satanistas luchan, digamos, contra esa conciencia crística.
Los satanistas has dicho, ¿no?
Los satanistas, los masones, satanistas,
Sí,
luchan contra esa conciencia crística, que es lo único realmente que nos puede salvar, porque cuando hablas con otra persona que está abducida por los medios de comunicación, ves que es imposible, es como picar roca, igual.
Que están hipnotizados.
Con un palo de madera, igual.
Es un hechizo. Me di cuenta yo al principio, Pedro, es como un hechizo realmente lo que han hecho.
Sí, es un embrujo, es un hechizo. Y eso se cura, pues, es que decir, lo que hay que hacer, sinceramente, en el libro, cuando le preguntan, por ejemplo, al final de la novela, el arconte, pues el niño habla con su yo futuro, ¿no?
Ajá.
Y su yo futuro, pues le explica todo, ¿no? Y le explica que realmente se está luchando contra seres de otras dimensiones y dice, ¿y cómo se lucha contra eso? Y le dice, pues con mucha fe y con oración y con mucha fe.
Ahí
Y el niño
está.
no lo entendía. Dice, bueno, ¿y cómo se lucha con oración y con mucha fe? Lo que no hacen falta son cañones más grandes, yo qué sé, pues armas más poderosas, ¿no?
Claro, claro.
Y ahora yo lo comprendo que realmente que ese es el único camino, o sea, tener mucha fe, o sea, luchar y morir por tus convicciones hasta el final, hasta el último momento, y la oración y pedir que venga Cristo, quiere decir, que Cristo vuelva, que estamos en esos momentos.
Voy a aprovechar, Pedro, para preguntarle la cuestión que en el primer encuentro que tuvimos en tu canal, le voy a preguntar ahora la cuestión que si él piensa que va a venir por segunda vez Cristo. O sea, voy a matar dos pájaros de un tiro, que él también ha entendido otra cosa aquella vez. So, Mark, basically, I'm very, very much agree with Pedro, actually. He thinks he's being very realistic. What can we do against this madness, against the globalism, against the dictatorship that's going on, against the hypnotization? The only thing is going to be divine intervention, he feels. He feels that there has to happen some kind of miracle, that right now we are dominated by, I think you spoke about it with Jerry Marsinski, with demonic entities that are controlling absolutely everything. The United Nations, the richest families in the world, the prime ministers, etc. And he feels that the only way is going to be that there's going to be some kind of angels, entities like Christ coming back and changing the whole thing. On the book of El Arconte, there is an interesting chapter towards the end. The child himself is talking to his own future, to his other future, and he's explaining him what we are going through right now. The only way we can fight is praying a lot, having immense amount of faith, and be sure that everything is going to be okay. That's the only way we can destroy the negative entities and all the negativity around us. Because like Pedro said, and I agree, we are not us, but the media, the prime ministers, all the citizens, the majority, they're under a gigantic spell. And the only way is going to be through some kind of divine intervention from heaven, from Jesus. And he was asking me, do you think Jesus Christ will come back, Mark? Maybe it's quite a deep question, that one.
Well, it's quite interesting. I mean, I think this whole philosophical argument is central to it all, because I think the power actually lies within knowledge.
That's right.
And understanding and comprehending what is going on and seeing it for exactly what it is, I think, is paramount. So understanding the system that they're trying to impose is the key to undermining or usurping what's going on. And that may sound like an abstract or kind of sweeping statement, but I don't think it is. Because once you understand and can clearly define what something is, then you can basically encompass it. And that is something that I've always found to be useful, because when you look at what these people are doing, it's actually grossly incompetent. And there's a lot of holes in this system. It very much depends on public participation, because as the police say, we cannot control everybody. The British police, when these so-called protests started, which aren't protests, they're just government-sanctioned gatherings, basically. When those started, the police were saying, well, we can't police people, we can't lock them down. And of course they can't. So this whole idea that you get locked down is not accurate, because all during the so-called lockdowns, it was possible to do exactly what you wanted to do. It was just that people were watching the television and they thought they couldn't go out.
I did what
once you got out, the roads were full. There was people going everywhere. And I think this is part of the propaganda. So in Austria, things are not going to be as bad as people think they are. There's going to be people. What are the police going to do? They're going to say, well, what are you doing out? Well, I'm going shopping and getting him some exercise. Okay, off you go. Well, so what is the lockdown? There isn't a lockdown. So I do think that a lot of this is about mental fortitude. And to me, that's what the whole of Windows on the World has always been about, being able to find the solutions and the philosophical kind of resilience to actually deal with this stuff. And that's what the whole of this show was really about when I called it the end of law. Yes, in one way. But what I found is that when confronted, a lot of these nuisance people and their demonic attachments can actually be beaten. So I think what Pedro's saying is interesting. But if you're taking on this energy that we're talking about when we talk about these supernatural events and beings, then you can achieve an awful lot. And most of it is about how you prepare yourself for it. And I don't know about you, but I'm at the phase now where I'm not frightened of anything. All I'm interested in is how to get through this, keep putting out good information, and do what I actually want to be here for, which is basically creating an archive of information and being able to create and make films and put out things before I die. The rest of it to me now has become kind of predictable. There are these threats, you know, there's what's happening in Australia is very serious, but ultimately a totalitarian system can never work. I think this is where they've gone wrong personally, because I don't think their system can work, because the whole point is all corporations are up for making money. You can't run the world with corporations. It just won't work, because there'll always be a way out. Of course, there are always going to be the people who follow everything slavishly, who read The Guardian, The Independent, and follow the BBC. But I don't think those are important right now, because this is a pathway that's been opened up. Either you take the right path or the left path. And I'm not talking about political ideologies here. I'm talking about there's a fork in the road. And you have to stand by what you actually believe in. So I know that I'm never going to be injected with this stuff. I'm never going to go along with it. And there are always going to be ways of doing things. But people have to actually start waking up to the fact that the state is not there to help them. They have to help themselves. And to me, that's mega important. So I'd like to finish with that, because I think it's quite a positive and optimistic note. But thanks a lot for coming on, Pedro. Just maybe reiterate a few of those points, get a last comment off Pedro, and then we'll be out of here.
No problem. Lo que me está diciendo Mark, Pedro, y está de acuerdo contigo en muchas cosas y lo encuentra muy interesante, dice que hay maneras quizás de superar estas entidades demónicas, porque es lo que está ocurriendo. Toda esta gente los políticos, periodistas están completamente dominados por entidades demónicas y no son los doctores, las enfermeras, ni saben lo que están haciendo, ¿no? Van a un hospital y están convencidos de que está lleno el hospital y está vacío, o sea, como tantas otras cosas. Mark dice que una vez que sabes la ley y no tienes miedo, puedes ir a cualquier lado. Él me dice, y yo estoy de acuerdo, cuando fueron los confinamientos, yo hacía mi vida normal, siempre salía. Cuando fue el primer confinamiento serio en Londres, en marzo de 2020, la policía nunca me preguntó nada, a dónde vas, a qué sitio vas. De hecho, un buen amigo mío, Javier Losada, me estaba comentando, parte de su familia creo que ha ido de vacaciones a Austria, y gente que conozco, que conocen austriacos, me han dicho que no es lo que están diciendo los medios de comunicación, que la gente, que los que no estén vacunados tienen que quedarse en casa. No, para nada, no es eso. O sea, ¿por qué? Porque Mark conoce a algunos policías que le dijeron, no podemos controlar, o sea, no somos demasiados, no podemos controlar a todo el mundo, no podemos ver quién se queda en casa, o sea, tendrías que llamar a todas las Fuerzas Armadas y todo eso. Y él dice que hay maneras de superarlos, porque dice que las leyes que traen son estúpidas, o sea, es completamente estúpido lo que han hecho. Dice que hay maneras de superarlos una vez que sabes la ley. Pero de todos modos, yo creo que estoy de acuerdo contigo de que vamos a tener que esperar por algo divino, si no va a ser muy difícil. En conclusión, ¿qué mensaje nos das a todos, a los españoles, a los ingleses, etcétera, Pedro?
Pues que el libro que estamos viviendo, el apocalipsis. Yo en mis vídeos digo, ¿qué tal? ¿Cómo va ese apocalipsis, no? Pero lo digo entre la broma y a
Y en
ver si
serio.
cuela y la gente se entera, porque mucha gente se va a morir y no sabe que está en el apocalipsis,
Claro,
prácticamente. Quiere
claro.
decir, ¿va a finalizar el mundo? Pues hombre, no. Yo espero que finalice para los malos, para los malos, eso sí.
Sí.
Pero que vivimos esos tiempos. Y en el libro del Apocalipsis, pues lo dice bien claro, que los hijos de la luz seremos perseguidos. Que habrá una
Señor.
persecución contra nosotros, pero los
Sí.
que resistan vencerán. Pues eso tenemos que hacerlo con conocimiento y sobre todo también tener muy presente, como dice, las palabras de Jesús, de ser sencillos como ser sencillos como palomas, pero astutos como serpientes. Es decir, el
Exacto.
ser buenas personas no implica,
Ser tonto.
evidentemente,
Claro.
ser tonto y, por supuesto, usar todos los medios a nuestra disposición, como él dice, pues conocer la ley para poder defenderte.
Muy bien. Excelente.
Y que los cristianos somos pacíficos, pero no pacifistas. No sé si se entiende.
Ya.
Que somos pacíficos, pero
Lo
no somos
entiendo.
pacifistas. Quiere decir
Ok.
que el diablo nos gustaría eliminarnos de forma pacífica, ¿entiendes? Y que
Claro.
creemos, y por supuesto, como final, que esperemos que no se llegue a eso, pero si el Estado se pone de manera que nos ataca hasta tal punto que el derecho a la legítima defensa está ahí.
Ajá. Ajá. Okay, fantastic. So Pedro is giving a very positive message. He keeps thinking as well, like there's gotta be some kind of divine intervention. He's convinced that we're going on the apocalypse right now. It's an incredible apocalypse where it says on the Bible as well, the children of the light, we will be prosecuted. That's clear. And he always says on his program, how is the apocalypse? But he's saying it half joking, half serious as well. He's saying as well, it's important that we resist as much as we can, and those ones that we are strong, we will win definitely. And he's saying important to be peaceful like the doves, but be wise like the snakes. We the Christians we might be kind of peaceful people, but we are not pacifists. We are prepared to retaliate and fight against the forces of evil definitely.
That's great. I think that's a brilliant way of summing it up. And I was a little worried that people might get lost in translation here, but I think it's pulled together really nicely.
Great.
And thanks, Pedro. That was really good and very insightful comment. Mm-hmm. And thank you for that. And I'll definitely do more of these. I've had a little break from doing the live streams. As people may know, we've had community strikes on YouTube, so I won't be putting up the real content of our shows here. I've been using YouTube just really to advertise, but I'm going to say thank you to you two and just finish this up now, because I don't want to be going on too long. And just stay down in the chat there, just stay there, and I will be with you in a couple of minutes. I'm just going to finish up this broadcast.
Okay, thank you. Bye. Quédate aquí, sí, Pedro, después fuera.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was very interesting, I thought, everybody. And I had a little trepidation about doing that because of the language barrier. We got a bit lost in translation a bit the last time we did that. It got a bit complicated. And I think that was on Pedro's show. But I think we kept that nice and simple. As I say, I've stopped doing a lot of the live streams on here. I merely come on here to advertise the Sunday shows. But I will do some more with information which leads into stuff that's on the website. And do please look in the archive. There's loads of stuff there. And thanks for everybody who supports the show. You can support us by going to the website, and you can be part of what we do. We have a Patreon page and PayPal and all the rest of it. And what you get with Windows on the World is, I think, rock solid information. There is stuff there that you can't find anywhere else. And that was the whole point of it, really. I'll never come on here just for the sake of it. I'll never, ever be a media WHORE. I've never wanted to do that, and I never will do that. The whole purpose of this is about information. All this I'm trying to do is convey information clearly and simply. Anything else is a side issue and a distraction, especially with what we're facing at the moment. But I do think that wisdom and power through knowledge is extremely important, because it's helped me tremendously get through the last 18 months. And it's actually a very interesting time to be on the planet. And as Pedro was saying, this can be resisted. What's happening is a criminal cabal. This is a global coup, and it's never happened in world history. So few being able to do this is quite incredible, but that's technocracy. Problem is that through communitarianism, there's millions of agents out there. So learn the Saul Alinsky rules, download Saul Alinsky's rules for radicals at windowsontheworld.net. It's a bit all over the place, but basically it was a blueprint for the way the media and the government are gaslighting you. Once you know how this works, if your organization gets targeted, as mine was, as I have been personally, you can use the same techniques back against these people. What they're doing is basically what demonic entities do. You have to know thine enemy. Thine enemy. I'm going to give you a quote here to finish off with, and this shows how everything went wrong for philosophers and people in particular, like Manly P. Hall. Manly P. Hall became an honorary Freemason and wrote extensively about systems and esoteric knowledge. Most of it, in my opinion, is nice to listen to, but does not apply to what's going on now. However, he made this statement, and I think it's incredibly interesting and slightly ironic. He said, "Here, creed and dogma will have no place. The superficial will be removed, and only the essential will be preserved. The world will be ruled by its most illumined minds, and each will occupy the position for which he or her is most admirably fitted." So bear that in mind and be the change you want to see. That was a quote from Manly P. Hall from The Secret Teachings of All Ages. So I think this wisdom and knowledge is at the root of everything, because people are falling by the wayside or being duped into illegal activities and encouraged to be part of a system they know nothing about because of ignorance. And that's always been the way. So thanks a lot, everybody, and good night. Do check us out at windowsontheworld.net. New show every Sunday, 9:30 p.m. UK time. Subscribe to us on Odyssey, and we have a Discord channel. All the links are on the homepage at Windows on the World. Thanks a lot.